I'm the person who wrote this, put the drawings together. I am at your beck and call at this point. So I really enjoyed doing this, to be honest with you. It was great working with Jeff and Chris. Learned a lot about your system. I feel pretty darn comfortable with it now. So, do you want me to go on, or do you?
Yep. Go for
Okay,
it.
sure. Yeah. So my whole purpose of the PowerPoint versus the write-up is that I can't imagine, unless you really want to get into this, that you're going to want to read it word for word or look at the drawings. So I've tried to make all my punchlines right here. And then if you have questions, I'll just go to the document if needed. That's my supporting evidence, basically. My punchline is going to be extremely straightforward. And we'll just be able to go from there. And I'll be able to take any questions at the end. I did mention already that I put my business card at the very front. So if you want to email me at any point with any follow-up questions that you might have, or you can just throw anything at me at that point, and I'd be more than glad to answer. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started on this. As most of you know, I wanted to start off with a punchline. So as you all do know, or at least I think you've heard, the generation capacity, or the non-generation capacity, has been and it'll continue to experience loads that exceed your current capacity. And so one of the only bits of technical jargon that you really need to know right now is the 25 MVA limit that your existing transformer has a 10, MVA limit, so 10, the number 10 MVA limit that your existing substation has. And that number has been, and it will be continuing to head in that direction. The reason it's so critical for a transformer in specific inside of that substation, off of Newton Street, correct? Is that when you have excessive loading on a transformer, it can exceed that. That's why you guys didn't go completely dark when it happened in the past. But as soon as you start approaching that limit, basically it's a thermal limit as well, so heat. And heat will degrade the oil in it, it'll degrade the coils in it, and then that's what's going to lead to a quick failure. So that's the thing that you want to avoid. So in my opinion, and I could defend this as long as you want, your city's electrical demand should be met with a second service point, a second substation. That's just the bottom line statement. So I heard earlier, just kind of in some random discussion, that people had concerns with the skid-mounted substation. I want to tell you right off the bat, my knee-jerk reaction when Chris told me about the skid-mounted substation was skepticism immediately. In the utility world, typically, we don't like new things. When people start talking smart grid and microgrid and that kind of stuff, a lot of times those things are just buzzwords, and a lot of times it could just mean a lot of nothing. And since 100 years ago, electricity's been electricity. Power plants fundamentally still have the same rotating mechanism. Transmission lines carry them all the way to substations. And that substation is just a transformer that dissipates it into your distribution system. So those things just don't change. So when I heard skid-mounted substation, I was very skeptical. So when I had conversations with ABB, I was very particular about my questions, and I have zero confidence issues with respect to it. It's a good idea for you guys. That's the punchline here. Now, one of the questions that came up in reference to the skid-mounted substation was kind of a similar skepticism, and the question that I started off with them was, and that's the manufacturers, then what is the advantage of the skid-mounted substation? Because if it's not the transformer, and it's not the switches, and it's not the basic building blocks that you would already have in a substation, then what's the advantage? And they just cut right to the chase, and they said it's in the construction. So what that basically means, instead of all these different vendors with all these different pieces of equipment all trying to meet at one place at one time, and coordinating that effort, you incur so much risk in the process. And that's why a lot of times when you hear about a substation being built, you'll hear things like, this is our budget and we went way over. In the case of the skid-mounted substation, because it's ABB, because it's the manufacturer, they can build the entire thing inside of a air-conditioned manufacturing plant, test it. Everybody's not hot, because they're in a cool environment, so they're not agitated. They don't want to just take off and go home, or they haven't left their home, so everybody's thinking normally, and they're there, and they can get that high level of confidence in the product that they have. Once that's done, they just put it on a truck, send it out to the site, put it on a site, and it's ready to go and is operable, and they can test it one more time. And what normally is a mess and takes a long amount of time is clean. It just plops right in. So my next point, I'm confident that the city has vetted out the options with energy as far as other types of tie points, because the topic of the 345 kV line came up, 115 kV line came up, and we vetted it out at the very beginning of it. Evergy was all gung-ho about it, and that gung-ho-edness came out of somebody within Evergy who actually, unfortunately, in this sense, knows the truth. And the truth is that there is an expectation that there's going to be load growth north of the city. That's just reality. And what we believe happened was that opinion got politicized within Evergy, and the idea ended up getting shot down. And so we tried, we pitched it as best we could, but Evergy, for whatever reason, and maybe there's something I don't know, so maybe I shouldn't say politicized, but they ended up tabling the idea. They kept the door open for maybe a 5 to 10 year later discussion, but for Baldwin's needs and the kind of time frames that you guys are looking at with your demand growth, it just wouldn't make sense to pursue that any further. And it would be honestly to your own detriment to do that. So I'm confident that that's been vetted out. Like I said earlier, there's going to be questions beyond tonight. I'm happy to assist. I have another city that has me on a retainer. If project management or another offshoot of this comes up, feel free to email me. You can email me anyways. You'll see my phone number in my response, my cell number, and I don't ever not answer. So feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions after all said and done. So you already know about LDB. We are local. We've got a long history with you guys. I believe we designed the power plant. Yeah, we did. Tom Lewis did, and he already talked to you guys, so you've got to meet him. We work with everybody from universities to the National Institute of Health. We do work with utilities, so large, small projects, that sort of thing. This is the brag about Dan slide, so we can just kind of skip over this. All right, so this is the need, and that's just kind of the reality. You can see pretty easily that 10 MVA line was already hit and already exceeded, and it's down a little, and you could probably look at things like LED lighting, efficient refrigerators, efficient systems within a home as a possibility why that number has gone down. But just a simple projection, and just even if you were to not see that red line, you can see it's going to go back up. So that's the bottom line to the need. That's your one service point. And anytime that line approaches that 10, anytime that blue line starts going up to the 10, you're looking at thermal capacity on the transformer. I'll give you one more little bit of information that might help the understanding of the urgency. So if this is your cap right here, I came from JEA. I was there for 9 years. They've got 66 substations, 68. They run all of their transformers at 50% capacity. That's the expectation for them. So, and they do that so that there's redundancy between various substations and to keep the thermal loadings down and not cause any sort of premature wear. So it is urgent. So the punchline for the substations is that there's two choices to make: the location, the type. The location, I understand, is going to be really important to you guys on a more local level. So I've still framed my answer in a way that still allows for a little bit of room. So when I say the north substation, in my mind, that does not mean, it does not force the north east corner of that intersection. It can be the southwest corner. It could be a block or two. That my opinion is still going to be the same on the north substation being the winner in this discussion. As far as substation type, you either have a typical standard, what every utility throughout the U.S. deals with, or the skid in this case. And so obviously, my opinion is with the skid. So a typical substation, on the right-hand side are the components that we evaluated or looked at when building the estimate. The total material costs with a small contingency, labor and material engineering with a contingency for both parts, and then a total contingency. And while that might seem like a lot of contingencies at this point in the design stage, this is still conceptual. And usually at a conceptual estimate level, that plus or minus really should be closer to 20%. And you'll hear some people say closer to 40, closer to 50. So I tried making my estimate as tight as I could without getting uncomfortable. I will say this, that even though that says $3.7 million, that's a tight number. So for a typical substation, I would count that 3.7 that you might already have in your head as a tight number that I tried to get exact pricing from manufacturers. I tried to get quotes, and I tried to think of every little doodad that would go in there. But because I went to the manufacturers and because I did get those specific kind of tight pricing, that means that in a year from now or more, whenever the city decides to move forward, those prices are going to change. So I still feel like that's a tight number, even though I put a 10% contingency, and it would be on the low side. It's really would only go up from there. The skid-mounted substation, same types of components. Nothing really changes. You still have the same transformer. You still have switchgear. You still have the CTs and PTs for protection and control. Still going to have concrete foundations. Hibachi has provided a quote of $2.5 million, and I made sure to point out that that's not the all-in number. So all that includes basically is what you see from the line that skid up. So all the ground preparation, the ground grid, the foundations, the civil structural for the components going in and out of the substation, specifically the ones coming in, more specifically. That is not part of that 2.5 million. But I went ahead and segregated out what those other components would be, created an estimate, and that's where I get the I just rounded 3.5 million. So this number, I'd consider that a pretty high confidence of accuracy. And I wouldn't call it on the high or low side. So that any plus or minus that maybe in your head you're doing should center around that number pretty well. The fact that 2.5 million of it was a quote from the manufacturer, that basically eliminates risk. And that's another thing that I hope to keep embedding in the idea of the skid, is that it reduces risk, and it reduces it two places: the construction and in the price. And of course, the construction part still translates ultimately to price, and all those things that can go wrong. Right before I came here, somebody mentioned that tonight's discussion was supposed to be on the substation. So I didn't know if you guys didn't want me talking about transmission. I'm assuming I should still touch on it. Okay, cool. Right. So with the transmission, you've got the fact that we looked at several different options. I'm going to start with the ones I'm going to eliminate. The 345 to 115 kV. That one was with Evergy. I already kind of touched on that. That one's off the table. And then so from there, you've got a 34.5 north substation tie, 35.5 east, and the 34.5 west. As far as the west and east substations go, those two I would eliminate. And like I said, I spent 9 years at distribution, so please keep that in mind at JEA. I would eliminate those two options simply because they're not central. So your entire electrical grid, the way it stands right now, is designed, I guess you did, to have kind of a central type idea. The feeders split out and they circle back. And so the idea of building a new component on the outside of what is kind of effectively tied together would then require additional monies to get that substation integrated into the rest of your system. So in Chris's whole world, you need to always have that option of what can I redundantly feed in case there's an outage? What can I feed from what else? And the more options he gets in that thinking, the better. And the only way that's going to happen on an east or west location is if there are additional pieces of distribution infrastructure built. The north substation, because it's so central, basically plops itself in the middle of a lot of feeders that can be used to connect and integrate back into your system. So the amount of additional work is reduced just by its physical and geographic location. Again, I'm not saying if it needs to go in the northeast corner or the southwest corner, but what I am saying is it will save you money, it will save headaches, and it will allow for electrical backing up if it's located in the north or central part of the city. And by the fact that it would be in the northern area, it would also allow for any expansion that occurs to the north of the city. So I'm going to just hit on the bullets of the north substation tie. That's the one I recommend. And like I said, it's the most cost effective when considering the benefits of its central location. And you know where it would be, the intersection of North Diagonal Road, First Street. And the transmission line that would come out of that substation would then extend east-south along Diagonal Road and then jog due south as soon as you hit that city's Baldwin sign coming into town. The east substation costs, or the transmission for the substation costs rather, I'm going to kind of quickly hit through the three costs, but mostly to reiterate what I don't want to have happen in the back of your head. So the bottom line cost to connect an east substation would be about $206,000. I didn't really put in a lot of contingency. So in your head at this point, going up to 250 would not be crazy, but let's just say 206 for the purpose of the point I'm trying to make right now. The north substation would be 368. So again, max 400. And then a Westgate already is the most expensive one. So I think we could probably just all agree, let's rule that one out. So if we go back now to the north and east substation to compare that price difference. So if we just, for hypothetical, say, okay, why would I spend $160,000 more compared to that price? And I would just easily tell you, because you're probably likely going to build about $500,000 worth of distribution infrastructure just to get the kind of tie points that you're going to get if you place it in the north substation. Now, I might be on the little high side on that, but I'm not exaggerating too much if I am. So depending on what Chris wanted and what the long-term plan was for the city, that could backfire real quick. And especially if you're thinking about future load growth in the north area, it's really going to backfire to put it in the east. So to me, putting it in the central is just the smartest thing to do. It's worth the slight extra cost to not have to go back and do all that distribution infrastructure build out you have to do to get that kind of redundancy. Does that make sense? so I know Tom already went over the generation stuff with you guys, so I'm actually not going to spend time on that right now, unless you're just dying to. So you did look at the two options. We're still in the Caterpillar option. So the bottom line is, like I said at the very beginning, north skid, going out of the north, heading east and south, right past that sign. That would be, to me, a clear winner. An east substation would be a second, but I would just tell you honestly, it's not worth it. And then regarding generation, I know there's a lot more internal discussion I think you guys would have to have if you were to consider moving forward on that. But that's it. I just wanted to get to the punchlines at the beginning as much as possible. That massive guy that you saw at Bronzo, I don't know if you saw it, but that's a guy I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with, so I'm just bragging a little, right? It's just me being a little cocky.
No, careful with your questions. Wow.
Isn't that awesome? Yeah, it's pretty thrilling. So, I'm open to questions or any discussion that you guys want to have.
Remind me again, what problem we're trying to solve is load in or redundancy? Okay, so it's both.
But
Correct. Right now, we're working on our substation right now, fixing a lot of issues with relays and such like that. And we're having to do a lot of that hot, which is not, on a lot of things, it's not what you want to do. But we have to because we have to keep the power on in town.
Right.
And in doing that, it's taking our generation out. We can't generate right now because we've got all the relays out and everything. So we have to do it hot. If we had a second substation, we could kill that substation, work on it, and then and feed the entire town off of the other substation. Also, if that transformer goes bad, God forbid, I need to find a piece of wood here pretty quick. But if that goes bad or that switchgear goes bad, he's going to have to generate. If the switchgear goes bad, then we're just going to be sitting in the dark until we find a trailer-mounted substation somewhere, which is going to cost us a fortune.
Right, so to do the maintenance, the redundancy piece, so each one's got to support the entire load.
Right.
And it sounds like this one's not going to do that, the current one.
Depends on the time of year.
Depends on the time of year, yes.
And I would stress again, so that's the limit. It's already hit.
Right.
And as transformers age, that heat degrades quicker.
So is it a single transformer or is there just
One transformer.
One transformer?
Yeah, and what the plan was, we've looked into also replacing the transformers down there after the substation is built. And it was going to be around $100,000 for the transformer itself to replace it, to put a bigger one in there. Now that number was from last year,
Right.
so it's probably a 30% increase on everything so far. So, but there's also going to you have to increase your conductor that's going to the transformer and switchgear. Now we have made a lot of improvements on our substation on the switchgear. We've added some breakers and stuff so we can kind of separate loads, stuff like that. So that part won't have to be affected. It's just basically the transformer and some of the conductor. But you can't do any of that until another substation is energized. And when he was talking about building the north, we built a lot of our lines. So, because we knew that someday we were going to build a substation to the north of town, on the north side of the highway. We built a lot of our lines where we can interconnect them with another substation in that vicinity fairly easily. We're not spending a lot of money.
Yeah, Chris didn't even need to tell me that. I just looking at the system, it was so intentional. I couldn't tell you that.
To expand a little bit on what Scott was asking, I think maybe you're trying to get there, but it sounds like the one that we already have, even if we had to shut one on down and rely on the one that already exists, we're not too far from that, not even be able to do that, right?
Well, the thing is he can, if say we are 11 or 12, like I said, it can go to 150%.
Okay.
That transformer can. Is that recommended? No. But also, what you can do is you can run that on that substation that we have right now. He can generate some of the load and take some of the load off of it.
Okay.
But in doing that, you're paying money in gas and diesel and personnel to do that.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm just gonna tell you, when he said you can run it up to 150%, in my mind, I went, oh God, no.
But you
And-
can't.
I'm not-
They say you can't.
Right,
do I want to do it? No
so don't,
way.
in
I do not
your
want
head,
But
don't think that that's actually a possibility. He knows the limits of it just because he's comfortable with it and he's done that.
no, I'm not comfortable with doing that.
Well, you know what I mean. Like you're at least willing to say it. I wasn't even willing to say
No,
that.
that's just what the manufacturer says you can do.
Right.
Do I ever want to see that happen?
No,
Oh,
it's
no,
like running your
no.
car at like full throttle, and
Yes,
yeah, you can do it.
It's basically running your engine at 8,000 RPMs and nonstop.
Yeah. And like I
Eventually,
said,
it's going to get up.
and like I said, JEA as a standard across all their substations ran at 50%. So
Do our future solar ambitions mitigate this?
no, they don't negatively impact it at all.
That's on
Oh,
the gener-
mitigate it. Sorry.
That's on,
Positive
on the generation side.
I would not rely on solar. I would say period. And part of the reason that I would say that is so solar is not about reliability. Solar is about kind of like in the best case moment when the sun's out and there are no clouds and everything like that. As far as reliability goes, that's the last thing you want to depend on because you just don't know. And battery storage can be expensive. It's still being kind of hashed out. All the problems around batteries and costs are still being hashed out. And I've personally seen like at the city of Marshall, where they'll show me the actual numbers on what it's like. Here's what it's supposed to be able to produce, and here's what it is producing on a nice sunny day. So I would not personally.
And you can watch our solar field that's on out at the power plant. It'll be here, and then 5 seconds later, it's down here.
Right.
Yeah.
It
You can actually
fluctuates
see
so much.
You can actually see when clouds pass.
And when he's trying to generate, and he has the solar going, then generators, when the cloud cover comes over, you can hear the generators wrap up because they're trying to cover what this is using.
Right.
So
Well, I have no doubt that they vary, but
Yeah.
but it does take the load off the.
it does,
Yeah.
it does, and that's part of what's happened. We've had a lot of solar installations that's taken some load off of that substation, but it's still running at 80 to 90% right now.
Right.
So, and I don't know if you ever watched. I know I showed this video about 10 years ago in Gardner. They had one of their substations. 2 raccoons ran in. I don't know if any of you watched that video that I showed. 2 raccoons. Ryan's seen it. 2 raccoons ran in. 1 came out. And when that one came out, its tail was on fire, and the whole substation was on fire too. So, and that's all it takes is one little thing could go wrong, and we're in the dark. And that's just, to me, and I know to Jeff, that's kind of a scary thing. Because if that happens, y'all not going to be happy with us. So,
Based on the question, can you describe the whole distribution system and where the substation fits into that? So we got Evergy coming in, right? And so that transforms it, distribution in the city at that point, right?
what happens is we have a 34,500 volt line comes in. There's 2 of them, actually. There's one comes from Ottawa, one comes from Gardner. They meet at one point, at one switch. And then we have a 34.5 line that goes from that switch to our substation, which is at 700. It goes into big air brake switch, comes down, goes through some PTs, CTs that are wired in there for metering. And then it goes through the bus to transformer. The transformer then reduces the power from 34,500 volts to 12,470 volts, which is our distribution. And then it goes into the switch gear, into a main breaker, kind of like your house, goes into a main breaker, and then it separates it to different breakers through the bus, just like your house. So basically, that building down there with all the breakers in there is just like the distribution panel that's in your home.
So that's used for the feed from Evergy.
Right.
Follow up on his point though, so our own generation and our solar transforms, it's already at 12, We skip the substation and it goes right to the distribution.
Yes.
So we don't need that substation for our own generation.
We need the breakers, we don't need the transformer.
So it still goes down to.
It still goes through Newton, goes to the breakers.
Gotcha.
It doesn't, but we don't need the transformer if they're generating the entire load, which right now, we cannot generate the entire load with this.
Right.
During this time of year.
Right. Okay.
It does give you peace of mind to know that these, it's reaching capacity during the summer months when solar is also helping you out with it.
Correct.
Not to say the problem doesn't still exist, we're talking through it, just talking through it. so you
Yeah.
understand.
Right, and you know, solar is a great thing. It's just it's something that's you can't rely on it, 100% of the day.
Right.
Dispatch.
Yeah, and it's not dispatchable. On the generation part, what I'm more worried about is the substation. Getting a second substation, so we do have redundancy. If something happens to that one, we have backup. As you know, we've had some problems here in the last 6 months with that substation with relays and all sorts of things. We spend a lot of money on that thing.
Right.
And a lot of that's because of the age, and a lot of it's because of it running like 85-90% capacity. So those things are things that we worry about.
How old is the transformer that's there right now?
It was installed in 1999.
How would you distribute the load between the two substations?
Okay, so we have feeders they separate down at the substation and go out through parts of town. Most of them land on the highway and go across the highway because we have to keep loads at a certain amperage because these breakers will trip out at high amperage load, just like the breakers in your house. So we, along that line, we'll have to build some distribution to attach to a few of these places, some of these places, and so that we can separate. And we have switches through the entire town, kind of like light switches. We have switches that are up near. We can open switches and we can break up the load between two substations if we had it. We're also in the process of building a line that will go over to the north side of town. It's kind of stalled out right now because of Baker University kind of messed me up when they decided to go underground over here by the stadium and stuff, so we're trying to get around that. But that way you can tie the two substations together if need be. So there's going to be multiple ways we can tie the feeders together.
Yeah, and to add on to that, a second new substation would also be able to carry the entire city because the assumption that we built into this is that it would have a higher capacity. So, and I can tell you point blank, it would last another 50 years.
So, is that, how much more capacity is that?
So for the purpose of estimating,
Right.
we double the capacity. Yeah, 25 MVA versus 10. So it would last. And
We wanted to make sure we had plenty of growth.
Yeah.
yeah, you've got room for growth, and you've got room to drop the new substation.
When I first started here, the transformer that we had was, I do believe it was 3 something. It was old. And when I first started here, the transformer was orange. And that wasn't because it was painted that way. It was hot all the time. So, and they had sprinklers going on all the time to try to keep it cool, which is not real cool. But it was pretty dangerous. And I just don't want to ever get that way.
So with the skid, I looked it up. It looks like you disconnect it and you pull it up onto a trailer. And is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is basically the 3D model that they provided us, and then so we, like I said to the committee before, we just went ahead and had it built for you guys, so you don't have anything to vote on. So it's good to go.
Like the old substation down there, when we built that, we did all the grounding. I mean, there's a lot of the stuff that the city employees have done in the past and still can do it. I mean, yeah, I got to be crew, but I was here when we built the old substation, so I've been here forever. So we did a lot. We did the grounding grid. down there, which this will have to have a grounding bridge. A lot of the concrete work we can do ourselves. And then the distribution part, and you know, all that stuff we can do ourselves. So it might take a little bit more time to do ourselves, but it'll save the city money in doing it. So, and I have the utmost confidence in my crew to handle that capability. So.
For some reason that it's lagging getting up there. But basically, if you want to get up, we have it in Google Earth. I don't know why it's lagging so bad, but let's see. I'm sure you guys can see it.
Yeah.
That would be it. So yeah, so the whole idea is it's on a skid metallic platform.
Yeah.
With the location.
And what's
No,
the cost
that'd be the
difference between
next
the
step.
skid and the
And a traditional.
traditional?
Right, that's what I was saying earlier. So basically, like I said, for some reason or another, there was a big lag in
You're just trying to show your picture.
I'm trying to show off. But so the typical one that we estimated was 3.7 million. So, and but like I said, that's a low, I can tell you right now, that's a low number because I got really accurate numbers and I only inflated contingencies 10% on materials and labor. The engineering contingency, that's two numbers, engineering and project management. But the material being at 10% is really a low scalping contingency that I put on there. So I would call that on a low. The hibachi with all in hibachi ABB, I got a 3.47 million.
Okay.
So not a huge cost difference, but when you factor in the reality that a typical substation is going to have a lot more cost inflation, a lot more fluctuation, this is a much more controllable price, and so the risk for that is so much lower
Right.
that it becomes to me. Basically, when we were first looking at it, in my mind, I was starting to gauge well, how much more would it be worth it if the substation or the skid mounted ends up coming more expensive than a typical. And to be honest with you, I'd factor in a $400,000 difference. I would have been willing to recommend a more expensive skid mounted up to about a $400,000 difference because I would trust that number. Whereas if you're just piecing together an estimate, man, any of those numbers could just go completely sideways. Whereas a manufacturer that's trying to build it all, it's like buying a car versus buying all the components for a car. I mean, you can kind of guess each one, but oh my gosh,
Right.
that's going to have so much variety in the numbers.
Sure.
And most utilities are going to the skid mount type transformer can be tested in the warehouse as it's completed, and then they can just bring it out as a whole thing. So, I mean, it's just more of a complete package, and that's why I was pushing it big time. So, but it has everything there.
When you say it goes to the warehouse, where is that?
Well, when they build it, in the
Just
warehouse,
asking
they build
questions.
that, and
Oh.
they have several warehouses throughout the United States, but where they build these is parts of those components are from, then they have a spot in Kansas City that they build these.
Yeah, I think he mentioned that he'd let us go visit, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I didn't catch the exact location, but I'd love to go. I mean,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically in a manufacturing plant nearby within the U.S. and the whole thing gets built right there. It's just like having a car built somewhere. It's all done in one place. Like I
Right.
said, air conditioned, nice facilities, people with testers, and so they're going to be able to double check and make sure that everything's okay versus going out to bid with several different manufacturers and one general installation contract going, I'm going to get this part from here because he's the cheapest. And I'm going to go over here and get this part from here because they're the cheapest, and just picking and choosing who they're going to get from. In fact, I'm not going to name the city, but I'm working with the city right now, and all they're doing is modifying an existing substation and I can tell you right now, just for the 1, 2, 3 components they're looking to add, well, they've got 3 different manufacturers. One of them happened to have been on 2 things, but I don't think they're gonna. No, they're not gonna win. Now that I think about it, so they're gonna have 3 different parts, 3 different manufacturers, 3 different groups of people that don't care what the other one's doing. All they care about is just making a sale to one city and right. And
we'll tell you that if you have 3 separate components, that say your switchgear, your relays don't match up to your SCADA system, when you're said and done, you're sitting there with a piece of junk that doesn't work, and we do not want that. We ran when we built the substation in '99. We ran into issues like that. The substation was energized before it was tested, because at that time they needed it badly. So the council at that time voted to energize it before it was tested, and then we had all kinds of problems.
I'll make one more.
And we had a 9-hour outage. I don't know if you all were here for that back in '99. We had a 9-hour outage because some of the stuff that wasn't tested failed. So, and I don't know, there was a lot of people that were upset. So,
And one more quick point in favor of the skid. So by me recommending the skid, keep in mind that I'm in effect chopping off my own leg when it comes to the design. Right, because if you guys are to do a typical substation, you would need an engineer to design the entire thing. And so of course I'd be like, hey, I'll do it. And it in effect cuts me off. And so I'm actually losing money by making that recommendation, just so you know. There will still be parts of it that, in my opinion, still should be basically sent to somebody like me. Like what you were just saying, you know, are these components going to match? You're still going to go through the specifications and them telling you every little product that's going to go in it and wanting approvals and that sort of thing. So there's still going to be a certain amount of project management. And as far as engineering goes, it's going to be around the site itself, so the civil engineering, and it's going to be around the components that come into the substation. So that's going to be structural. Both our company has all of that, and so that would still be on the table for any engineer. But to get back to the original point, by me recommending the skid, I'm in effect saying I know for a fact we wouldn't be getting this engineering. So keep that in mind. So
do we lose any flexibility by choosing transformer or switch it, by going with Hitachi ABB? I mean, do they select the full components of the skid, or are we involved in that at all?
we can be involved in it, yes.
and
So
this,
here's your skid. We do one brand. It's got these components. Take it or leave it, or do you specify?
We can specify what we want in it, yes.
on the flip side, if you guys are to piecemeal a new substation and you send it out to bid, depending on how that was framed, right, you could still end up having the contractor do it all, or you'd end up breaking it up into parts, where right, and it just creates its own problem. So.
I mean, the skid makes sense. It sounds like power is catching up with computer world, because centralized integration's been going on for quite a while, and all the advantages you mentioned, DOAs, are limited because you test it all, it goes out. The on-site labor's typically more expensive than if you got somebody in a factory with, that's what they do every day. Yeah, so that's what they do, and they've got, it's usually less expensive than trying to build it on site. So all those reasons make sense.
You don't have the mess either.
And you don't have a mess, and it's a shorter cycle time between rolling it in and powering it up. So, I get it, it makes sense. I'm just kind of interested to see that power's now there.
And again, for you, like I said, I'm being wide open about that. When Chris first mentioned it, I was like, skid, what are you talking about? I've never even heard of one, much less seen one.
Yeah.
And it bugged me. And the first thing that kind of impressed upon me that this is a possible reality was when they sent me a list of, and here's all the ones we've built, and we can go visit any one of them. Like, they just eliminated the argument as quick as possible. I was like, okay, all right, well, they're built. How do they perform? What's the advantage? That was a big thing I wanted to know. Why would anybody want that over the other? And when they let out the things that you're talking about, they can do the testing, they can control, when and where, and by who, just in one location, all these variables just get eliminated, so all these risks get eliminated, so all these costs get eliminated.
That's why I would be surprised if it wasn't lower cost for all those reasons.
Yeah.
If it weren't, then you'd have some explaining.
Well, and just for concept's sake, like I said, the estimate that I have for the natural substitutes is actually a lot tighter than where we are.
Right, exactly.
Right,
You made it closer than it probably really is.
Right, exactly.
There are several of them around the state of Kansas, and skid mounts that I've went and looked at. And, go visit family, I look up where skid mount was, and go check it out and meet the technician there and go over it and stuff. While my wife and my kids are sitting in their car waiting, which didn't make them real happy. But I did a lot of research on the skid mounts before I even brought it to Dave. So,
How long have you been out there? I mean, what's the
oldest one that I seen was built. The oldest skid mount that I had seen that was out there was built in 1979,
Wow.
and it is old, but it's still in function.
Right.
And it was a special order through, and that was when it was KP&L.
Yeah.
So.
I remember that.
And it was a special design that was made by an engineer through KP&L, and he sent it off to this company. They built it and had it sitting there. And they said, we have no problems with it. So.
So, one thing that I would be happy to try and interject as much as I can in would be the location. Are you guys still searching for the location, or are you guys comfortable with an either or for a north or east substation?
I think that's kind of the next step, is first decide to build the substation and then where to, and then discuss where we want to put it.
Because I could help talk it out as far as east versus north, if that's where the conversation needs to go. The case that Chris and I basically made for the north is that everything's centralized electrically. You already basically have a perfect place to put your panel, basically your new house panel. Whereas if you put it over here, you're gonna have to rewire a bunch of stuff just to get back into the system. That's the bottom line of the argument. So that's why in my mind, it's a no-brainer. Get it central in the north area where you're expecting some growth and it might be out there. That's the perfect place to have it.
So that's the question. How does the expected growth impact centrally located piece?
So
if
sure.
centrally located is an advantage, but if all the growth is going to happen in the west?
It's centrally located in the north and in the north side of the highway. So it could be, go either way.
So you're, I thought it was more centrally located north-south with the other one, but you're
No.
saying centrally to whatever's north of the highway.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And you can still feed out east-west as necessary.
Where this one down, the substation down here was built kind of centrally located on the south side. So
Yeah, gotcha. That makes more sense. So it's kind of growth north of the highway, south of the highway. Or what these two substations are going to support, load-wise,
correct.
long term.
And the good thing about the north side of the highway, I mean, that's where most of your commercial is. Anyway, is on, out on the highway. So, I mean, having a bigger transformer out there gives us a little bit more time if we want to increase the size of the transformer down on the south side, we can, but it kind of pushes back a little bit. So.
City grows where you don't expect it. Just load it up on the trailer and move it to where you need it.
Unbolt it?
Just unbolt it and just go.
Yeah.
I have to have a bigger trailer.
But just to, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to ask if there's any other questions.
Oh, okay. All I was going to say that to add to that, the central idea, because the kind of the side, you brought up kind of a side point, Didn't you, when you, what was the comment you made again? Sorry, my brain's.
Which one?
When you
He's been talking a lot tonight, so he doesn't remember.
He doesn't
Well, the joke you made with Chris.
The point about, if the
Moving it.
population grew a different direction, you could,
Right.
it would be more transportable.
Right, so still to me, the underlying problem is you're gonna lose the one that you have now. It's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. You've already hit its expected cap, and yeah, you could go over, but when you start going over, it'd be like driving with your brakes on. I mean, you're gonna just wear the snot out of that thing, and then what you end up dealing with is a possibility of a catastrophic failure. And then you have no lights, unless it happens to be a situation where some of your generation can come on. But even then, for a while, it's going to be dark. And I believe that aren't there plans to retire one of the generators? Or isn't it?
They will eventually self-retire.
Yeah.
And there'll be some point where.
Right. So it's not like you
They're
had
not
this.
worth repair.
Right. It's not like you had this, primed generation facility. The building's fine, and if you guys end up replacing generators, that's great. And we've looked at it, so I'm confident that you could make improvements there without any problem. In fact, they designed it for expansion if needed. But for the ones that are sitting there right now, just the age of them alone doesn't make them a good, reliable backup. You know what I mean? I mean, that to me, it's just not. You're going to lose your sub. You're going to exceed it. Something is going to go wrong there, and that's your one point of service. And your backup's not all that.
Okay, Dan, you need to start talking about
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but
You're making yourself very nervous.
I'm sorry. Well, it worries me, because honestly, I don't want to see you guys go through with it, and I wouldn't want anything to get in the way of something like this, because to me, it's just such an obvious solution. It's such a surefire thing that it's like.
And we did,
Go
in
for
this
it.
study, there is generation in this study, but we can't, at the department head meeting, we decided to kind of separate the two, discuss the substation first, because that's the immediate need, and then discuss the generation at a later point. Whenever you guys want to discuss that, we can, and that's when we, probably take a
But
look.
they're separate decisions really, because if you don't generate at all, we'd still be able to take it in both substations, right? So it becomes the trade-off between redundancy to Evergy, producing their own, the cost, benefits, and all that. To me, it's a separate discussion.
So having Tom Lutz here,
Well,
You're hesitating.
We have to have another substation no matter what.
Right.
I mean, that's going to have to happen because we've grown beyond what we have now, and that's not even including the redundancy part. It's nice to have the redundancy, but we have hit that point where that substation is to its max, and we're going to have to do something with it now or soon. The generation. Is it nice to have? I guess it's two separate deals, but the generation is nice to have the capability of generating the entire town. Is if we lose Evergy, which it does happen a lot more than anybody else knows. And these guys have generated a lot. I mean, during that February, we generated the entire town and saved the city. I mean, they did. Excuse me. I'm not taking credit. I delivered pizza to it. So. Yeah. Sorry. Anyways, these guys generated the entire town through that whole time when it was cold. And if they didn't, we'd have rolling blackouts, or the town could be out, or that plant is needed. It is needed, but the substation is just needed now.
One thing that, of course, is the second substation would be tied into the existing feeds anyway.
Yeah.
So if we lose our feeds, we have two feeds, the Ottawa and West Gardner. So if we lose those, it doesn't matter which substation we're running on, they will both be dead.
Yeah.
So that's one of the generations. And I think the plan is to talk about this at the next workshop. That's what I was told anyway, to be prepared to talk about generation at the next workshop.
and Tom Lutz would be glad to do that. He's more of an expert in that area.
We can discuss the additional solar and some of those different options. That would be a whole nother hour or two.
Yeah, to me, that's less clear than this one, just based on, growth, where we're at, and how long it's gonna take us to get this second one on. I mean, what are you projecting even have
5 years.
how many?
5 years at the latest. We start, I mean, to get everything completed and totally
Right.
done.
So, are we, so,
That's what concerns me
Right.
is, yeah, 5
So-
years is not that long,
So-
but if you're at your capacity, 5
But
years
I-
is a long
and I'm
time.
talking with, working with budget and everything else, you know, trying not to just blow it out
yeah,
of the water, the budget out of the water, you know, working with what we have and do it that way. And, I mean, could we do it sooner? Probably yes. It's
Yes.
just that we gotta go by.
And let me say why. If this was a typical standard substation, yeah, 5 years or more, from beginning to end for you guys decision, moving forward. But the fact that it can be manufactured, remember, because I specifically asked him, how long would it take? Like, what if we were to say a year? He was like, yeah, we could do that. So it's not like they.
But I'm talking completely, with the distribution completely and everything
Yeah,
done, if we did
right.
it in-house. If we did it in-house, it could take up to 5, we'd be finished in 5 years, for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But if we did it in-house.
So just so you know,
by the budget,
in my mind,
on the distribution side.
like any design work that you need or the actual substation itself, I'd put a 2 to 3 year time limit in my mind. So I know you're thinking of other things too, but I'm just wanting you to know so that way, it's not as bad as it seems because you get the advantage of the manufacturing.
I always estimate it long. It just,
And normally I would totally agree, especially if it was a typical substation. I'd say 5 or more.
that's all. If there's any other questions, I can help you with.
And the reason I got doom and gloomy is because I wanted to be absolutely sure about, because I understand it's a big decision for you guys, and you should vet out every question. But to me, it's crystal clear. The solution's crystal clear. Fortunately, you do have options in how you hook back into Evergy. That's clear. I mean, I see a lot of clean shots to actually getting it accomplished. So, but that's on the design side. That's not necessarily on the dealing with the budgets and everything like that. As far as actually getting it, I think it's a clear shot. You've got land, you've got locations, all these things come together, and it can happen. So there's nothing really holding you guys back other than your own internal finances and costs. So. Well, I'm sure you all are going to go home and start reading this. If you do, my business card is in it. You can email any question. This is the substantiating evidence, basically. You'll be able to see, you're going to see the exact same discussion, exact same information, and it's basically just laying out the cases. And if you want to delve in and then shoot me an email, hey Dan, why did you say this or whatever, I'd be more than glad to answer. So, but I didn't think you wanted me to read it tonight. So.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.